What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York here back at my headquarters, and today we are here with the author of this brand new kick-ass book, The Metaliad. We are here with the writer, Will Berger. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you here.
Hey Alex, I've always wanted to be on this show, so yay.
Yeah, we finally made it happen. It only took, what, like 5.5, 6 years in the making?
About that, yeah. Well, now I've got a reason to be here.
Yep, exactly. It's so great, though, to be able to talk with you about this book, to really get into the mindset of the writer behind this. When it came to The Metaliad, as somebody who's been involved in the New York metal scene, I see you just as, I see you at more shows than I see myself at shows, pretty much. Was this, being that this is a fictional book, though, was this based off of experiences that you were having, or was there like a lot of external sources outside of the metal scene that you were using for inspiration in this book?
Yes and yes. Okay, so let me start with okay, what is this, and why is this on Heavy New York? Right? Okay. So, hi everybody. I am a writer. I usually write about music, usually classical. But what I did was about a year ago. No, not even, just a few months ago. I realized that I was seeing things in our scene, in our New York music scene, heavy music scene, that I recognized as kind of living out old myths and legends. Specifically, the idea of a big battle between everyone and forces of neo-fascism and neo-Nazis in our metal scene, and they're there. And they're mainstream enablers, which we see in our political spectrum now too, in a certain, that things have infiltrated the mainstream that just 5-6 years ago were unthinkable. And now my background in school and so forth is in classics, literature, Roman and Italian specifically. So I'm all about myth and legend. Okay, so there was a little bit of crossover of those, both things from that I read in college and stayed with me, and things that I was seeing today on our scene. So that's why we have this. And it has models, it is a mock epic poem. Now that, let me explain. That doesn't just mean like a satire. That's something else. A mock epic is a very specific genre. And there was one that was written in Renaissance Italy called the Orlando Furioso. Take notes. And it's funny because I was biking over here today and I was thinking of a lot because it was just about to rain, like waiting on the thunder, and I said, started humming a song from 1532, like Night Moves, Bob Seger. It was just like, it keeps coming up for me, even, and it's not well known in English, but it was hugely influential in tone and everything else. And in fact, things like Guardians of the Galaxy, totally pure mock epic. Following the same ideas from the Orlando Furioso. Even Star Wars, when it's good, where you've got a little bit of undercutting of tone and a little bit of comedy in the right places, and so on, and like, we're being epic, so they have in Star Wars, right, they had like, statement of theme and important things going on, and then you had Carrie Fisher walking up with her big LA butt, and just like, Darth Vader, I'm going to kick your butt, and it was the shift of tone that comes from this tradition, okay? Mm-hmm. So there was that, and then, so I started writing this, and my husband, who and who's adjacent to the metal scene, not exactly a metalhead, but he loves the scene, I said to him, you know what, I'm going to write a mock epic poem about our scene. Kind of using the ideas of the Orlando Furioso. And he said, great, but what you need to do is tell your story. Tell the story of what's happening right now first. And then worry about telling everybody what a cool-ass classics reader you are second. I was like, all right, you are being a bitch, but you're not wrong. And so that's what I did, and that's what we have. So we have this poem that's about us. You're in it. You're one of the characters, although I cut you from the reading. But yeah, you're Alex the vlogger, and so we've got you kind of in there doing things, and you're one of the people we try and convince, like, no, you don't always have to represent both sides that way. Not when somebody's being really bad. You don't represent them. Okay, and so on and so forth. So all that's going on. It's a poem. It's written in the same rhyme scheme as these classics and the Orlando Furioso. It's A, B, A, B, A, B, C, C. 11 syllables every line. Unbroken for 50,000 words.
That's
yeah, it's crazy.
That's an accomplishment.
It's crazy. It just flew out too. And within that, there are a lot of references to people we know, kind of disguised, or they sort of turned into multiple people, including me. A lot of quotations woven in of metal bands, of classic rock bands, of people we know, and also international metal bands, and all that, because their things kept coming up in our story. And then, all right, let me just go there. So some of them come up in both the classics and in metal. And my metalhead friends get it. They're like, mythology and legend live in metal already, very comfortably. So when I've been telling people that, they're like, okay, it makes sense. But also other things like in the Orlando Furioso, which I'm not writing fantasy or anything like that. They have magic and stuff. I don't. But there is one scene, Orlando the Knight loses his mind, so they have to go where all things that are lost are kept, which is on the dark side of the moon. That's where that comes from. And so one of them flies a flying horse and flies to the dark side of the moon and gets his wits back and puts them in his pocket and then makes him whip them like paupers. And so it's like one of those stories that keeps coming back in weird ways, like what happens when you lose your mind.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, my favorite...
Was that a good answer?
That was a very good answer, and very, very poetic.
So you got that? It's all metal, it's all classics, it's all none of the above, and it's all of the above.
Well, one of my favorite quotes about that, I forgot what author said it, which is terrible, but one of my favorite quotes is, the thing is with fiction is that it has to make sense. And, I really think that this serves as almost a great external metaphor for not even just the metal scene, but a scene in general. And when it comes to writing, because you have this specific structure that you write, and you are a very prolific writer, as we got this magnificent piece of literature as well. Is there a method behind the madness that applies to everything you write, or does every single thing you write call for its own approach?
The second one. Because, like, for instance, this is a compendium of articles I've written with new commentary around them, and it ended up being 10 times as much commentary as articles. So that was one thing. And then nonfiction. Fiction, this is not exactly fiction. It's mock epic poetry, which is something else. And I have notes in there because, yes, he's pretentious enough to write his own notes, but I'll make an allusion to, all the song quotes and stuff are annotated. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing. Like, you don't have to know metal, you don't have to know classical literature, you don't have to know current events in the news. I've got you covered. But it's all there. So, no, this is different. But as far as like the poem itself, dude, it flew out. Even though it's like all metered and rhymed, it just flew. I wrote that in 2 months. It just flew out.
It seems like inspiration strikes when you least expect it, though, right?
It wasn't inspiration as much as it was the right time and zeitgeist, like the spirit of the times to tell this story in this tone.
Mm-hmm. Well, as somebody, I feel like you are a storyteller in multiple languages, and the way that you demonstrate art, as somebody who has worked in the Metropolitan Opera for many years, and as somebody who
I'm that guy.
As somebody who
I'm either the metalhead at the Met or the opera guy in the mosh pit, one or the other.
I think that's like your secret identity. It's almost kind of like...
It's not secret. I keep telling you.
I know, but I will say that the opera part of you is almost like your Clark Kent in a way. I love it.
Or is it the Superman?
You never know. That's up to whoever reads your biography. But when it comes to like getting the drive to write,
yeah.
do you almost have to be in a specific mood or be in a specific place in order to get that energy to write, or do you just feel?
No, I'm a professional writer. That's what I do at work. That's what I do after work. And when I wasn't, when I was like kind of rolling around the poppy fields in Santa Cruz, then I needed to be inspired. But now, no, it's work. It's absolute work. It's just like a house painter or a mechanic or anything. You have the moment of inspiration, right? Of like, I think I'll lay a pipe or paint a house or whatever you do. And you think that through. And the rest is absolute just work.
Do you almost, is there though a lot of observation that you have to do, especially with the Metaliad? Do you almost feel like that there's a lot of observation that has to be involved before you put pen to paper and writing it away?
Well, sure, but that's why, I say this at work, and when filling out hours or do you have overtime or whatever, you say, a writer is always working. Always working. And as pretentious as that sounds, is how far a non-writer would be from understanding that. But, I mean, I suppose it's true. Your art, your music, everything you do, you're always thinking of how does this bus pulling up to this corner affect my art or my music, right? Mm-hmm. You're always, what does this have to do with my vision? So you're always working.
I feel like...
You're trying to date, you're always thinking like, this could be a song, right?
Yeah, of course. But I feel like when it comes to literature, another quote that I really like is, the role of genius is not to complicate the simple, but to simplify the complicated. You, with both everything that you've written, I feel like you do a great job at taking some complex experiences, or just experiences people don't have, and are really able to put it into terminology that people can understand in a way. Is there a specific art to learning how to do that? I know that you have a background in literature, and you have all these different structures in the back of your mind. I'd imagine there is, being that you're in the world of rock and roll, there's plenty of rule breaking involved, but there is also that classical literature element that is applied to this as well.
Well, there's the same level of structure versus rule breaking in all of them. People don't think there is, but there is. And yeah, that's my thing, man. That's my thing. I'm like beyond genre, right? Because, and part of this project for me was a coming out story as a massive nerd, as someone who I thought, the guy who was really into classical epic poetry was not someone I waved around in public for a long time. And then I started realizing through the metal community and through you guys specifically, with your love of people who love gaming and fantasy and sci-fi and all these metal adjacent things, that nerd is the metalhead. That, the only bit of me that's tough ass is the total nerd. And that's what this is. This is about bringing together that nerd with like the warrior quest and the vision of how I think I look when I'm standing next to a mosh pit. I never get in them, but I'm always nearby them. That's another superpower of mine. Hugging the wall since 1976. So, yes, and that's also a product of, I'm from LA, which in those days was not a hotbed of culture according to people in New York. But one thing that was great about growing up in LA, especially in the 70s, was that it was about do your own thing, and in a really cool way. So I could get into my classical music, I could do this stuff, and I could go to shows, and it didn't seem as weird there. And that also has to do, which is another thing that's going on, I'm mixed racially and ethnically. And so, I'm Mexican-Jewish, basically, or Mexican and Jewish, not Mexican-Jewish, but anyway, because there's that too. And, which is very LA, because there's Mexicans and Jews, eventually they get together. But, and I always got from all sides a little bit of like, well, you're not really anything, are you? And it's like, no, wait a second. If I'm beyond any one genre, that means I'm lots of things. That doesn't mean I'm not anything. And that's the new purity. That's the new way to be. And it's that way with genres of metal.
100%.
Right? Like, I write a lot of band bios and stuff for local bands. And every one of them will say like, well, we don't fit into any one category, right? Like, well, we're kind of Black and Death with a little thrashy new, right? And it's true because every one of us, racially, sexually, gender-wise, and music-wise, artistically, the old categories don't work anymore. They limit. You get that with sexuality, and that's part of our story too. Most of the heroes are straight, but not entirely, and but still, no matter who you are, everyone will say, well, yeah, but I'm not really that way. People are coming up with, I'm non-binary or whatever. I'm somewhere on a spectrum of whatever. And even like the totally straight guys I know will say, yeah, I'm straight, but I'm not like them. I'm the cool straight guy. So it's like straight with an asterisk, right? And that's the new way to be. Like, we don't fit into the categories anymore, and that's what this is all about. It's not crossing over, it's bringing together.
I think with every event that you've done with Crossing Heavy Borders and all these other, that's what I think,
that was a benefit we were doing.
You say you write for a living. I think more importantly, and not to discredit the writing, you also bring people together for a living, and I think that is completely.
It's my mission.
And you mission accomplished with this book alone.
Well, all right. So that's why we're having this reading, and you're coming, and you should. We didn't even discuss this, but
we're going to.
Bring some art.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
We're going to in the end. At the end of this interview, the final question I wanted to ask you is the most difficult one. If you're ready, for everything that you write, whether it's literature, band bios, whatever, how do you know when you are finished?
Mm-hmm. That is hard. Usually that's what deadlines are for.
I got the answer from bands too.
Right, usually that's what deadlines are for, because without them I'd be dead in the water. With this, I had a story to tell, and I knew the last line was, going to be, they take the bad guy away. Mm-hmm. I'll give it away. The good guys win this time. So once I got there, it was over. I didn't want it to be over, but so that way it was good. I had a terminus, a point of arrival the whole time, which I needed, because another thing of mock epic is Ariosto and Orlando Furioso kind of invented this idea of 10 different strands of stories going on with cliffhangers. And then, the dragon, I'd love to tell you what happened, but I've got to go back to this other story, right? And so to keep track of that was really hard. I had to storyboard it, but I knew where it was going when I wrote it. And when I wrote it, I said to Stephen, wait, I just typed the end. But I started thinking of the sequel right away.
That happens, right?
Yeah.
And,
The Charmodyssey.
Exactly.
That's it. That's the sequel, the Charmodyssey. Wait for it.
Definitely. And finally, one reason why we're doing this interview is not only to promote this amazing masterpiece of literature, but we got a reading October 23rd. Plug everything you got. Okay, so now this tradition, like I said, it's 11 syllable lines and a certain rhyme scheme, and it was very much based on the oral tradition. So I do spoken word events in the metal community and beyond, mostly metal, and I was doing some, say, 5-minute readings from this in it, as it was in process even, and I realized that people were getting it. People were getting it when they were hearing it in a way that they weren't when they were reading it, like, what is this lunatic going on about? Mm-hmm. So that told me, okay, I need a reading, but I need a massive one. And what I've arranged Sunday, October 23rd, 3 p.m. New York time, live streamed internationally, so just DM me, whatever, I'll hook you up, or go to my website, more on which in a moment. And as part of this thing of crossing borders and beyond genre, I have an ensemble of people reading with me. There are, I think, 18 of us, and it's people from radio, which I work in, at the Metropolitan Opera. Did we mention that? Yeah.
I'm that guy on the radio. People from radio, people from Broadway, actors, people from television, and a lot of metalheads. Singers, instrumentalists, and all of whom, for whom it is a little bit of a stretch, something different. And what it'll be, they'll be reading parts in it. I cut you out because I couldn't have you read it, but I couldn't have you not read it.
It's all good.
But there will be others. They're reading roles, and I'm narrating it along with another narrator who happens to be Jason Leckberg, who's kind of Nefariant.
Check him out.
Nefariant. Talk about beyond genre. Like,
Yeah,
what
right.
even are they doing? But Jason's like, one of the focal points of New York music. He just is. Like, a lot of roads go through Jason, so to speak. And he's the other narrator, which is interesting. And then I've got stage managers reading cues, and you're going to ask, like, wait, you're going to read this whole thing? Well, darn near. Not quite. I mean, I've cut out some, and I've got some people saying, well, then they all go to Bushwick, or whatever. That takes 10 pages here. But we're basically doing that, and it's going to be like a sort of different level than a lot of what we're used to. The model of the reading is Orson Welles used to do this with the Mercury Players, with Agnes Moorehead and Tyrone Power and a bunch of people. And they would read for radio, but to a live audience. So on stools, we'll all be on scripts because it's a lot of words. I'm trying to bring it in under 3 hours. So I'm just telling you that right now because we used to have
It's still shorter than an Opeth concert, right?
it's shorter than, this is what I'm telling everybody. I've seen you all either at a metal festival or at the opera or in a Tolkien movie. And so I know you can handle epic when you want to. So, but we're going to be there, like the Orson Welles Players, that's the idea, just kind of reading to the room. And hopefully our voices, we have great singer, Nick Sayre, from Lies Beneath and Resolution 15, Dino Colacido, who's a guitarist from Bound by Substance, Stephen J. Miller, my husband, not the other Stephen Miller, who is actually one of the bad guys, who is an actor, as well as an author. The women we have writers, composer woman. I have all different kinds of people, just focusing on the words. That was another thing we were doing in our spoken word things. Like I was having metalheads say, "No, I just want your lyrics because one, come on, we can't understand you, and two, I know we can read the lyrics, but no one does. So come and share your lyrics with us, and don't growl them. We're not singing, but if you can make people think you are singing and growling, or being, singing a metal song just with your words alone, then we've got something heavy going on."
We definitely do. Will, I want to thank you so much for this amazing chat,
Alex,
everybody.
I've always wanted to be on Heavy New York.
Well, hope it was worth the wait, everybody. Will Berger, author of The Metaliad. Be sure to check out this amazing book.
And DM me for tickets or passes for the live stream for Sunday, because it's going to be, I hate to flog the word, epic. I'm William Berger. Find me on Facebook. WilliamBergerPresents.com is my website. WBNY City on Instagram. And just find me.
Yep, and check out these two amazing pieces of literature. You do not want to miss them.
I got other books too.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, man.
We will see you next time on Heavy New York.